We read Thistlefoot by GennaRose Nethercott.
We read?
We did! We read Thistlefoot by GennaRose Nethercott, and we're going to talk about it. So this is another one of those titles that I saw on TikTok, and I thought the cover looked interesting, and I picked it up once, didn't read it, returned it to the library, and then Chris got it on Libby, right? So he started listening to the audio, and once he started it, then I had to.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm glad I did. It was a really good one.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it. It's an interesting mix of fantasy and it's in a modern setting, so it's not quite what you might expect from fantasy, but there are magical elements. I thought it was really good.
Yeah. So it's kind of a modern retelling of the Baba Yaga story. We also have some Jewish mysticism and some Russian folklore all mixed in. So it's kind of a hodgepodge of a lot of really interesting things that works really well together.
Mm-hmm.
So what'd you like?
Just put me on the spot.
We literally just said that this is what we're going to say.
I thought there was a good sense of mystery to the whole novel. I thought it is kind of very well laid out, put together, and it kind of kept you moving along at a good pace with wanting to kind of keep knowing the next thing, but not keeping you so in the dark that it wasn't interesting.
Yeah, I think that the switching perspectives amongst the chapters really helped that.
And with that, I thought the characters were good. I enjoyed Bellatine is a very likable character. I thought Isaac was a little not great at first, but I liked him more than Devin did.
I couldn't connect with his character for some reason. I don't know what it was. He just, in the beginning, wasn't lovable enough for me, and I never really connected with him. The character that I really loved was Thistlefoot, our titular character here. The house itself, I thought it was really fantastic that the house itself was a character and was part of the storytelling.
You get those chapters, and it feels like a very different voice, which is really interesting. Where were we? Oh, Isaac. I thought that Isaac was a likable character, but not as much at first because they kind of characterized him to be a little skeezy, maybe a little dishonest. But I thought that the author did a good job of helping you kind of come to terms with who he is and why.
Yeah, I don't think he was a bad character, and I don't think his characterization was lacking. For some reason, I just didn't connect to him. I just cared so much more about Bellatine and then the Baba Yaga lore and the house itself that I could take him or leave him.
But he was
very important. He was very important. And I will say that the last third, probably, I changed my perspective on him a little bit.
Yeah.
He was very well written. You just don't have to like every character, and I just didn't like
That's
him.
true. So one of the things that I kind of wanted more of, maybe it wasn't exactly an issue, but there's a few characters in the book that kind of come out of nowhere. Mm-hmm. There's not a whole lot of explanation of who they are or how they got to be the way that they are, and they play a pretty big role in
They're
it.
very significant.
And they don't
and you trust them.
And you also don't really get any resolution of what they're doing after
That's
the
true.
events of the story. They're just kind of like in it. They come in and out for a moment. There's the resolution, and then they disappear. I'm assuming that this is her first book, so I'm assuming that they may show up in other books.
That would be a cool thread.
I do think that the main character's story is finished, though. I do think
so too.
Yeah. So.
And Thistlefoot, obviously, there's some resolution there that we won't go into, but.
Right.
One really cool thing is the whole story of the Drowning Fool. There's this puppet show woven throughout that's part of the thing that Isaac and Bellatine are doing, and I think it's really cool, and I would love to see somebody try to pull those pieces together and actually put that puppet show
that would be neat
out somehow. And I don't, that may exist. I didn't do any reading about it because I wanted to not spoil, but that would be really neat.
It's not exactly genre bending. It definitely is solidly within this kind of modern fantasy genre, but I kind of like the vibe of it. It is kind of, it's almost like there are elements of magical realism,
Yeah.
but not exactly. But there are these. They talk about how there are other instances of houses just like sprouting body parts and things like that. They don't think it's weird that the house has chicken feet, and nobody thinks it's weird.
Right, because this is Baba Yaga's house from the traditional Baba Yaga story with the house on chicken feet, and this house on chicken feet just comes to America, and everybody's kind of chill with the fact that it just runs across the country where it needs to be, which is odd. And that's that kind of magical realism. Everything else feels fairly realistic, but then the Chickenfoot house. But it doesn't feel out of place. It's really cool.
Yeah, I did a little bit think that the antagonist of the story maybe wasn't present enough at times. I mean, there was a little bit of a sense of like, something's coming, we don't know exactly what it is, but I didn't think it was till a good way through the book that you felt that there was some sort of like danger happening, or some sort of like conflict. You didn't really know what the conflict was going to be. It was
more about the conflict with Isaac and Bellatine at that point. I've not read much Russian literature or things set in Russia, and so to get that Russian lore along with some of that Jewish mysticism and the religion pieces there, that was really neat and very different for me. It was a very different voice than I am used to, and I enjoyed it. I think that the writing is really good.
Yeah, I thought it was very good.
It's very well written. It feels very ornate, but not in an obnoxious way. Just it's very well crafted, and it feels very intentionally written. If that makes sense. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I don't know. It reminded me of some sort of like ornate wood carving. The sentences themselves and the way the book read, it felt very, very beautifully written, but very intentionally crafted, I guess.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I can agree with that. I listen to a lot of books, so I listen to this, and maybe I don't experience it in exactly the same way. If that makes sense.
Perhaps. I'm a really fast reader. Like, I read very quickly, but there were definitely some times that I had to like slow my roll and reread some sections because the writing is very heavy, not clunky, but very heavy and
what would you
detailed.
say? Dense,
maybe, but in a good way. It's very it feels like a piece of art in its writing. And so I had to slow myself down to kind of appreciate that in points.
How did you feel about the fact that there is magic in it? There is magic. They have magic.
I liked it. I really liked Bellatine's magic. The whole embering piece was really interesting to me. Well, spoiler alert, but it was really neat. I still, and maybe this is, I don't know. I didn't like Isaac, and I didn't feel connected to his story or his magic in the same way that I did.
I think for a while you didn't even realize what he was doing had an essence of magic to it. Right?
Perhaps.
Well, and I think that I thought it was very clear at the very beginning, the very first thing that happens, it's like the opening scene of the book. It says that part of what he's doing is skill, but there was an essence of something else. Right.
And so once I started to realize Bellatine had the magic, I assumed he did as well. I thought it wasn't as significant, but his significance just came a little later, I think.
Right.
Love the sapphic moments in this. That was really surprised me in a really good way. I liked that. And just some of the other characters that came into play because of Bellatine. Things that I talked too much, so I had to write notes. The end really surprised me. Oh, it got us.
Yeah,
it really got you.
There's moments.
I was more prepared.
Give it away, so.
I read it more guardedly as we reached the end because I knew I needed to be more guarded. So it didn't destroy me in the same way, but it's definitely something to be prepared for.
There's some heavy moments, definitely.
It's really good. If you were looking for something different, this is a good option. I can't think of a book to compare it to.
Yeah, it's very unique.
You of anything?
No, not really. Yeah. It's very unique.
So, definitely, it was kind of a top book last year. It just came out last year.
Yeah.
It deserves that place. I wonder if we will see a movie of it.
Probably.
Fairly soon.
I would assume.
But they better do it right. Because there's a lot to do amazingly, but there'd be a lot to mess up here, I think.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Cool.
Thistlefoot.